Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I've got the lovers as the obstacle. 'Cause those damn lovers always getting in the way. And the high priestess or the popess as the opportunity. So let's start with the obstacle. Oh man, radically different scenarios between the Waite tarot deck and the Marseille tarot deck. Um, kind of interesting. Besides you know the difference in imagery, it's interesting, I think, to note that the Marseille card, l'amoureux, um, if I'm not mistaken, that means the lover and not the lovers, and it's it's kind of interesting to try and figure out who who the lover is. Um, my attention is generally drawn to the center figure. You know, both of the it's got characters on either side. The kind of Cupid angel figure is looking down. It seems like the attention of the card is drawn on that individual, but uh, that's not guaranteed. And then similarly, in the lovers, there's two human appearing characters, and then this angelic character, and then also a snake. And are the lovers just the two humans? Is there a lover triad? Is the snake involved in that interpretation? Um, yeah, I find this card very interesting. Also, in terms of the numerology associated with interpreting the tarot, the six um, the six is often interpreted as a receptive, balanced, steady card that represents a, a type of perfection. And this is the six, the two, the four, the eight. But the six is certainly one of those cards that is meant to, yeah, represent a balance. And the particularly in the Marseille deck, the lover, that's an action packed card. Um, it's interesting to try and get at an interpretation that isn't dynamic. Like, is it one of those? The only constant is change. Is the balanced stability of that card just kind of a meta representation of the fact that there's always lovers, there will always be lovers. Um, that kind of confusion of love just keeps going, is constant, is in itself on that meta level. Is it static and consistent? Um, as the as the obstacle, I think one of the interpretations that for me applies more to the Waite card is in the disconnect between the character on the left, the female character looking up at the angelic form, the character on the right looking at the female character. Um, I think this could, there's a positive interpretation for this and a negative one, as with all things. But looking at this card in its kind of negative warning obstacle way, I think that this could symbolize a situation where one of the individuals in a relationship is is looking up at some ideal, right? Is focused on not not her lover, but something higher, something representative, right? Angels are messengers and agents of God. God is often described as uh, it's a being of love, or it's a symbolic representation of love, right? Um, so it's you got one partner that's looking to the skies, that has lofty ideas of what love is, while the other person is just kind of looking directly at them, looking at the real thing. So I think one of the obstacles here could be that disconnect. Now, what's what's the ideal is a good question that I think this raises. Who, if if the disconnect between these two individuals is something that is going to contribute to some problems, we could then pretty safely say that this connect is, it's not a good thing. It's a nihilistic situation. Um, but then who's in the wrong position, right? Is is the guy should the guy be looking up at the angel also, and should they synchronize in that sense, or should the woman look down at the guy, and should they synchronize that way? Um, as far as the kind of optimistic interpretation of that imbalance goes, I'm reminded of an aspect of childhood development. I was recently listening to someone was saying that, when kids are growing up and they're interacting with each other socially, this is one of the reasons why it's so important for kids to have, you know, peers of their own age, ideally. That as they develop, they alternate between being the kind of the dominant, cool, popular, alpha, effective individual, right? That being the underdog, being the inferior of the two. Let's say when kids hang out together, or if they're in a group or whatever, there's usually some there's usually some metric that comes up that is embraced as the measure that the kids hold themselves to. Now, this is often some warped, you know, messed up thing, like who's got the most Pokemon cards, or I don't know, something that an onlooker could kind of just face palm, be like, "Okay, this is how they're determining, the hierarchy of who's essentially like who's the good kid and who's the bad kid." And but but regardless of what standards that hierarchy is set up on, often the kids in the losing position will um, will try harder to catch up, right? They'll put more effort in, and meanwhile, the kids at the top get lazy and complacent. It's also a great analogy for business, companies, the economy, governments. Like, when you're uh, like, yeah, you don't really try very hard when you're at the top, right? When you're at the bottom, it's often that's when people try the hardest, do the most radical shit. They come up with the most original ideas, create the most apt and current poetry and music and art. Um, but so with childhood development, it's really desirable not to enforce any sort of not to put external pressure on equalizing the social status of the kids, because the thing that inspires the kids um, to keep improving, uh, essentially the way they become socialized is they socialize each other as they try and as they play catch up to the next kid. And then the kid that's at the bottom tries harder, often comes out on top, because the kid that was on top, you get the idea. So yeah, so perhaps an interpretation of why this number six card, the lover or the lovers, represents perfection in some sense, is that maybe the perfect union is the one where each member is taking turns grasping at progressively loftier and loftier interpretations of devotion, love, intimacy, whatever. And they sort of take turns climbing the rungs of this ladder, right? Constantly surpassing each other. Never like standing still, y- you know, uh, never becoming complacent out of a situation, y- you know, out of equality, essentially, right? It's like there's someone always has some catching up to do or some surpassing, right? So if that's the ideal positive interpretation of this card, the obstacle or warning here would be that um, that either either one of the individuals involved has their sights set you know unrealistically high, or is not giving or is not giving their partner a chance to catch up, or that one of the individuals is just not trying. And I mean, this, I imagine there would be a limit, going back to the analogy of like the childhood kind of development. I imagine that there would be a limit to, if your peers are a little bit ahead of you, if you feel like you could catch up and surpass them, you might be inspired to do so. But if they're just miles ahead of you, you might be entirely disenchanted to even bother trying, right? So those certainly could be some of the negative side effects or aspects of this. And then another one, as I guess a more literal interpretation of this as something that a person encounters in their life. Sometimes just being exposed to, you know, couples that are really in love, that have crazy high ideals and romantic aspirations, and sometimes just being in the presence of that can can have that really demoralizing effect, right? Um, I think that I think it's pretty rare when this happens in real life. I think that if anything, when you encounter these great couples in real life, that they're inspiring, or at least that's been my experience. I love running into like couples that are, in their 80s, and they're like flirting with each other, spanking each other's butts. They got all these raunchy inside jokes. It's like, they're just like crazy about each other. They still have this like sexual amorous side to their relationship. It's incredible, and I think inspiring to see that in couples that are like, yeah, like 80 years old. They've been together for 60 years. Um, but I think the more negative aspect of this could be like movies, television, reality TV shows, any fiction that essentially tricks us into believing that it's real. Um, and to a degree, there's a danger to media, fictional media, because to a large extent, like consciously, we know that we're watching fiction, but a really big part of our subconscious just takes everything we see as reality and can't distinguish between what we know as fiction from reality. So I think another possible obstacle here is the, you know, letting the unrealistic, letting the unrealistic and fictional depictions of love, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Just negatively contrast your own experiences, uh, your own perceptions about love. Like seeing some famous couple having their crazy, fictionally romantic, perfect relationship on a soap opera, and then getting depressed that your husband is uh, never going to be one of these people, completely overlooking all of the very real, amazing things that you have going on with this person. Still, also by far a superior situation to be in than just like being alone, right? Um, but yeah, so I think this might represent the, being distracted by the ideal and overlooking the thing that's, right there in reality. Um, but also the inverse. And then, as far as the opportunity, this card, I have a really interesting, difficult time interpreting this card sometimes. Um, Particularly the Waite version on the right. I see this as a really weird kind of facade of femininity put forth. Like this is the second time around since I've been doing these every day that I've come across this card, and uh, I was I was really curious when I started how my opinions would change over time. Like that's one of the things I love about the tarot is often you get the same card a couple of times within a year, and each time it feels a little different, you know. Um, so I was really curious with this card, what kind of impression I would intuit next time I saw it. But I gotta say, it feels pretty similar. It feels to me like this is an individual who is largely frozen, like they're very still, they're very immobile. They're frozen in a state of perfection, of a sense, you know, a state of balance. But the thing that is freezing them, the thing that is enforcing that order is it it's this external structure, you know, these pillars, both the Marseille and the Waite card have like a tapestry of some sort suspended behind this individual, framing them. With the Marseille, it's this light blue color that represents, you know, spirituality, faith, emotions. Um, with the Waite, it's this tapestry decorated with pomegranates, symbolizing, you know, like fertility, a very feminine sort of aspect of fertility. Um, and yeah, the way it's suspended between these two pillars in the Waite card, I really see this as the it's like some some traditional institution, religious, possibly, you know, the B and the J are they reference these two pillars in a it's like a old temple in Israel, I believe. So it's a reference to, you know, religious tradition. And yeah, I feel like this character is like she's all done up in this like costume of feminine purity and fertility, this virginesque, innocent, modest, you know, all those things. She's dressed up in this, and but it's like I don't really see it as that's not like her outfit that she put on. This is like this institution, whether it's a literal, you know, institution of people who are, you know, dressing her, you know, saying sit here. It's like she's posing for a photo, and it's like we got all the decorations of femininity, all of this particular traditional idea of femininity. We're gonna dress up this actress, you know. Um, so either I kind of see this as like either it's someone else that's sort of arranging this, or even if she's the one doing it, she's doing it like under the influence of this tradition. You know, she's reading this in both of the cards. The character has this book, has some sort of document. Again, kind of reminds me of the, you know, the written word, the traditional text. It's the opposite of, you know, when you codify something, you write something down, it stays the same. It's the opposite from like the volatility. It's a really interesting counter to the card preceding this, the Magician, right? It's the number one card, symbolizes this kind of endless potential, like all of the ace cards in the suit. It's chaotic, but it contains within it the potential for anything to happen. This card, in a lot of ways, it has this perfect, balanced, restrictive order, right? Um, Now, yeah, generally, I guess maybe it's just a part of my intuition is resistant to this kind of this kind of orderliness, or maybe just when it applies to women. It's hard to say what it is about my subconscious that sort of rejects this idea. But as far as opportunities are concerned, enough talking about my biased kind of intuitive negative take on this. As far as opportunities are concerned, um, there certainly are benefits to adhering to tradition, and especially adhering to tradition when an individual is trying to give themselves distinction, maybe is a one way to put it. If you want to participate and thrive in a culture, it certainly helps people to to feel like they can accurately predict what you're going to do. And one of the reasons, especially historically, for different outfits being worn by people is because it really puts people's mind at ease to be able to look at you and go, "Oh, I see, you're a priest," and then they can predict all sorts of things. You're a merchant, you're a soldier, whatever, right? Um, Now there's a responsibility, obviously. Like there was like a Dave Chappelle stand up where he's got this joke where he's talking about this woman who some woman who's dressed up like a prostitute, you know, in whatever in his opinion, and and she's getting pissed off that she's being approached and treated like a street worker would be treated, because she's like, I'm not a street worker. This is just how I feel like dressing. This is just my style, my fashion style. And he contrasts that with, the joke is some guy who just feels like dressing up like a cop, being approached by someone who's like, oh my God, officer, help, help, you know, my whatever, my kid is being mugged or something. And he's like, hey man, fuck off. Like, this is just how I feel like dressing. Don't have any expectations. Like, don't place any expectations on my behavior and what kind of role I'm supposed to assume in society because I choose to dress like this. It's just an outfit, right? Um, Absurd as it is, I think it's it's certainly sort of touching on uh, an aspect of reality that, like, people certainly judge each other. It could often be like, I don't know. People often get turned off of interacting with someone. They might make friends with, they might meet someone, and if they can't really place what that person's about, where they stand, where they work, what they do, if they can't really uh, quickly gather enough evidence to create some sort of model of that person, prejudicial as it is, right? Like, but still, some basic prejudice. Uh, when people can't get that, the response is often, you know, they don't trust that person. They have no idea what to expect. Hence, that person just seems kind of chaotic. In some ways, it's more satisfying to that curiosity to meet someone and to be able to clearly and definitively establish that, oh, this person's a criminal, they're a thief or something. It's like, at least you know who you're dealing with, as opposed to someone who's like, you're like, so what do you do? And they're like, oh, just, stuff. And it's like, okay, I have no idea, who is this person? Like, but yeah, so I think the opportunity here could be to, I don't necessarily think it has to be to put on this, whole outfit of virginal purity and, uh, dedication to the codified written law, insofar as it relates to how to present yourself like a woman, right? I think that um, I don't think that this image is outdated altogether, but I think the amount of variability from place to place about, you know, what a man looks like or what a woman looks like is so all over the place that um, that embracing something like this I don't think would be effective everywhere consistently. But nonetheless, I think the opportunity might be to consider, to be considerate of what the current uh, codified ideas are about how the different types of people appear, what the different types of people, uh, the different types of classes, not in the sort of class warfare sense, but like in programming, right? Or like in Dungeons and Dragons, it's like, oh, like, you're a warlock, you're a warrior, you're a paladin, like in terms of class in that sense. It's like to become aware of what the current sort of ideas are held by the community or society around you as to, you know, like right now, if you know that the way you look is related to a certain type of character, and yet you also know that you are definitely not that type of character, you just enjoy looking that way. It's like that you know might be an eye-opening experience to be like, well, is it worth it to start aiming to look like the thing, the thing you are, so that people can more quickly kind of come to that what would you call it, come to that recognition of who you are. There's a lot of there's a lot of fakery. I remember when the pickup artist movement started, so much of that, the what was it called, the peacocking, it was like people giving, these pickup gurus giving men advice on, like, you know here's how you have to dress, right? Dressing this way is going to have an effect on the way you're perceived, often subconsciously. These women you're trying to pick up in nightclubs or whatever, are going to be tricked by the fact that you're wearing this kind of a suit with no tie, and you got the unbuttoned shirt to here and whatever. It's like, if if the if the goal of that was to trick people into thinking that you are a certain type of person when you're not, and the way you go about doing that is by imitating the way those people dress. It's like, I mean, yeah, that might work for, maybe that works when you're going out in the nightclub, picking people up, trying to have a one night stand or something. But like, it's not something that you could consistently do in life, like, people, if that person, like, God forbid that person comes home with you, instead of, I don't know, what were you planning on doing? Hooking up in the bathroom, of the nightclub. The person comes home with you and, like, what, immediately sees that that's the only nice, like, outfit that you have, and the rest of your wardrobe is shit, and you live in a, it's not necessarily that you live in a shitty apartment. Maybe your apartment's all right, but still, is it going to live up to the impression that you created with this whole outfit, right? Um, Same thing with women, it's like, so many so many of my friends over the years that are women have expressed that, like, when they're going on first dates or when they're going, out to try and meet people, it's like they dress extra, you know, they don't really say slutty, but they're like, dress uh like I'm an exciting, fun-loving person, but like, but what they're really looking for is, or at least, these are the people that I've talked to personally. It's like, yeah, they want to have some fun, but mostly what they're looking for is, like, someone to share a life with, someone they like. They don't they don't want to get into a steady relationship with some sort of party boy that would, be the counterpart to this party girl appearance that they're putting on. It's it's just kind of insane to imagine, like, going to a crazy party nightclub looking like the way you look when you're at home, right? Like in your fucking jogging pants or something. But like, but if that's primarily who you are, then yeah, you see the situation there. But yeah, so I think the opportunity here could be to consider to become open and considerate to um, incorporating what the contemporary kind of codified descriptors of how people look and act are in relationship to who you are and how you're interested in acting, what you're interested in doing. Um, yeah, I'm gonna wrap up there. Thanks for thanks for watching and listening. Drop me a like or a comment if you would like to be entered into this week's super awesome free one-on-one reading. And I'll be back tomorrow. Take care.